Whoa. Whoa, that's actually really good. I'm impressed. I've impressed myself. Hi, everyone. I'm Erika Galentin of Sovereignty Herbs, and I'm here with Mountain Rose in beautiful Eugene, Oregon to teach you all a little bit about distillation and distilling aromatics and making hydrosols. And we're going to really focus on making hydrosols in your kitchen at home. Super, super easy and a lot of fun. But I'm also going to take you through some of the mechanics of things like harvesting fresh plant material, using fresh versus dry. I'm even going to show you what a copper alembic still looks like. And that way I can describe the physics of distillation and what you can expect to sort of simulate on your kitchen stove. We are with one of the most iconic species in Oregon, the Douglas fir, Pseudotsuga menzesii. Say that 10 times fast, menzesii. Gosh, it's a wonderful name. And what I really love about the evergreens, right? This is an evergreen, is that they are just full of aromatic compounds. And they're all very different. So a fir versus a spruce versus a pine, they all have very slightly different aromatic profiles. But in a lot of ways, they're sort of interchangeable. So if you don't have a Douglas fir where you are, that's fine. You can also use a pine species or a fir species. And I like them because they are prolific, as you can see. There's a lot of material to work with, and you don't necessarily have to worry about over harvesting or even really harming the tree too much if you're cognizant about how you're harvesting. Another thing that I really love, and especially right now, is that they get very sticky. So when you're out touching the plant and you're harvesting the plant, you're going to kind of get some of the sticky resins on you. And those sticky resins are actually part of the aromatics of the plant. So the stickier, the better is what I say. We're going to be focusing on doing a stovetop distillation today. And with that, you don't really need a lot of plant material. You can actually just have a very small amount of plant material. So I'm not going to be taking too much. But when it comes to harvesting from your garden or harvesting from a tree like this, you want to focus on hopefully as sunny a day as you possibly can. You don't want the material to be wet. You want it to be nice and dry. And when we're working with evergreens like this one, I tend to prefer going for the newer growth, the fleshier growth, because evergreens themselves are a really dense plant material. And sometimes in order to sort of liberate the aromatics from the plant material, you have to do like a pre-soak the night before. And the more dense the plant material is, so for example, the older it is, the longer you need to soak it in order to sort of liberate those compounds. We're going to focus today on harvesting some of the fresher growth, and this is what's going to go into the pot, along with some other fun things. It's really amazing to think about when we're taking plant material from a tree, for example, how long it actually took the tree to make this branch. That took several seasons. So I always like to go forward with this, petting the tree, saying thank you, and just kind of approaching it with a bit of gratitude. So we are going to focus mostly on these areas, and we want to harvest in a way that is going to encourage growth to return. So we're going to take some snips here, and we're going to take some snips here, and we're just going to keep snipping. And like I said, I'm focusing mostly on sort of this newer growth if I can. We don't need too much. And you can see that I'm trying to go from different areas of the tree. So I'm not trying to harvest all from the same spot. We want to spread it out a little bit, like you were never here. It's waving at me. Okay. I'm going to get a little bit more, but you kind of get the idea. Just a little bit more, not a ton. How are we doing down here? Oh, look at this one. That's a good one right there. Going for that nice tender growth. Super exciting. This is going to make a beautiful hydrosol. Okay, I think that's probably plenty. Let's go brew. Okay, so we have now moved into our kitchen space, and we're going to go through chopping up and preparing our plant material for the still. But before we get to all of that, I want to take you through some of the equipment that you're going to need in order to do a hydrosol on your stove. So I think the most important thing is you're going to want a pot like this with a glass lid preferably. And we're going to make sure that this lid, it's not going to be on it like a normal pot. It's actually going to be on it upside down. And you're going to see why in a second. But also you'll notice that oftentimes with these glass lids, you're going to have a little hole here. And so one of the things that I like to do, and it'll become clear why in a second, is I like to actually cover this up with some masking tape. We're going to be using this lid in the pot sort of as our condenser. And so we want this upside down in a bowl shape. And if we do that, the melting ice might start dripping through into our hydrosol. So I like to cover it up. And that's pretty easy to do. You can use masking tape. You can use whatever kind of tape you want. Or you can just wing it and not plug the hole at all. Completely up to you. Masking tape isn't the most beautiful looking thing, but it works. And I'll do it on both sides just to make sure. Okay. All right, so we have our pot. We have our glass lid that's going to be upside down. And we need a few other pieces of equipment that you would have hopefully in a standard kitchen. We have 2 Pyrex glass bowls here, and Pyrex being, very, very heat tolerant. One of these is going to be a stand inside the pot, and the other is going to be the bowl that collects the hydrosol. So it's going to look like this inside the pot. You want a bowl as a stand or something as a stand. You might see some people will put like rocks in the bottom of their pot or something else that's really heat stable, so that we can elevate the collection bowl off of the bottom of the pot and up sort of into the air of the pot. I like to make sure that there's enough elevation space to ensure that you can get plenty of plant material around and you can get plenty of water around this. So when we go to put this all together, it will make a lot of sense. But we've got our stand, we've got and you could do it this way, you could do it this way, whichever way you think is more fun. And we're gonna go ahead and put these things into the pot. I'm just gonna start with saying also, before we even get anywhere near putting all of this together, it's very, very, very important that you make sure everything is clean, 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 clean. This way of distilling, in particular, when you're doing it in your kitchen stove, is going to be the method of distilling that is going to introduce as many contaminants as you possibly can. And what happens when we have contamination in our hydrosols is that they are not very shelf stable. So we want to make sure that everything is as clean as possible. So just wash with soap and water and totally dried, and that your hands are clean as well. I will say that because it's very difficult to keep this completely sanitized in your own kitchen, it is going to be important that you use your hydrosol that you make right away. And hydrosols are living medicines anyway. So these are something that you're going to want to make and you're going to want to use right away. You're not going to want to just keep it stored in a refrigerator where you're going to forget about it. So make sure you use it quickly, use it enjoyfully, and make sure everything is super, super clean before you get started. So I'm going to go ahead and put part of this process together. So that's our stand. We're going to put that in here. And then we're going to add the water and the plant material. But we'll start with the plant material for fun. And so we've got our lovely Douglas fir that we collected outside. And I even brought in, I get a lot of questions about this. Can you use the cones? And absolutely you can use the cones. And in particular, this is super fun because these cones have some official goo on them or resin. And so the resins are a big part of the aroma of the plant. And so it's nice that we've got a couple chunks of aroma here that we are going to add to our hydrosol. I will say that resins are sticky when they melt, and they will get all over your equipment. And that can sometimes, not be great for your pots and pans. But if you get some isopropyl alcohol or even some acetone, like nail polish remover, you can easily clean those resins off. With these, I'm just going to pop them in here willy-nilly. And I will say too, one thing about evergreens, if you're going to be working with pine or fir or spruce, any of them, it's often best to try to soak them overnight first because they are really dense. This is really dense plant material, and it does enjoy kind of getting its cells opened up and ready to release those aromatics. So In an ideal situation, I probably would have allowed this to soak overnight, and then I would have moved this over to the distillation unit. Oh, it's so sticky. Another thing about wanting to distill this way, it seems really like a lot of work, but we want to think about extracting the aromatics from plants the same way that we want to extract other medicinal qualities of plants. And the smaller that your the little pieces are of plant material, the more surface area you've exposed to that extraction process. And so while I could potentially just throw these branches in here and just let them float about, I really like to chop things up really nicely, especially with the fresh. And I will say, another question I get a lot about distilling, even distilling at home on the stovetop, is, whether or not you should use fresh plant material or dry plant material, if there's pros and cons to each. And I'll say that I generally prefer using fresh plant material because it's live, it's vital. It hasn't, had a chance for those living compounds, those aromatic compounds to evaporate into the atmosphere as the drying process has happened. So I definitely prefer to use fresh. However, you can use dry as well. So we're gonna do a really fancy experiment here where we've got some wonderful lavender. It's very aromatic right now. And we've also got some rose petals. And so we're going to do a co-distillation, and I'm breaking all of the rules. There actually aren't any rules. I really want to just encourage you to experiment, but I'm going to use some of this wonderful fresh Doug fir, and then we're also going to add in the dried lavender and dried rose, and we're just going to see what happens. So not only are we commingling species, we're also commingling fresh and dry. Next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to add all of our plant material to the pot. And I'm going to do that because it's going to help me figure out how much water to put in also. It's always important that you've got enough water in there to keep the plant material floating off the surface of the bottom of the pot, because otherwise you're going to fry the plant material and your hydrosol is going to smell like fried plant material, which if that's your thing, you can go ahead and do that. But starting with the sort of denser stuff first, I'm just going to pop all this fir in there. It's amazing. It smells like the Pacific coast. It's beautiful. All right, I'm now going to pop in the lavender, and I'm just, people want to know how much quantity. I'm not weighing any of this. This is sort of an experiment, and I will always suggest you make really good notes. So if your hydrosol is really beautiful and it works out really well, you know how much you've used. But I am, as an herbalist, I kind of wing it sometimes with these things, especially when I'm playing and having fun. So I don't know how much lavender this is per weight, but it's a nice mounded pile. So maybe that's my measure, a nice mounded pile. And we're gonna do the same with the rose. And this looks it's kind of like we're cooking, I think that it's important to play around when we're cooking, and it's just as fun to play around when we're making things like hydrosols. Oh, that's really pretty. Nice. Okay, so we have quite a lot of plant material in here. I really went for it. And I'm gonna go ahead now and add some water. This is about a quart. I think that'll probably be enough. And I'm doing all of this, adding in all of the good stuff before I put in our collection vessel, because otherwise it's really hard to get the water in, but we're gonna go ahead and do that. So I'm just pouring it all around like so. And I think we need a little bit more. Okay, I'm gonna add a little bit more. I really wanna see the plant material start to sort of rise up in the pot. And that way I know that it's floating on the surface and it's not necessarily touching the bottom of the pot. So you will also notice that if you're using a glass bowl like I have and turned it upside down, there's going to be an air pocket in there. So your bowl might start to rise up as well a little bit, but that'll be fine once we put our collection vessel in. Okay, so we've got the water. We've got the plant material. Yeah, that's going to be excellent. Okay, so here's our little collection vessel. We're going to go ahead and pop that down as well. Everything's nice and clean. We're in perfect shape. So that's kind of what that looks like. So what's going to happen here is the steam is going to come up around the sides of the bowl. It's going to then hit the bottom of the glass lid, which is going to have ice on it. And as I will explain with the copper alembic still, this is part of the physics of distillation. When you have steam that rises and then it hits a cold surface, it condenses back into water. And because this is convex or concave, one of the two, it's going to kind of drip down. The hydrosol will drip down and often will drip down onto this handle. You want to make sure the handle's nice and clean as well. And then it will drip back down into the collection vessel itself. So I'm just going to pop that on there like that. And we are ready for ice. We're going to crank it up and make some hydrosol. We're going to go ahead and I've turned the heat on. I'm going to talk to you about how high to keep the heat. But we are going to go ahead and fill this lid up with ice. This is probably not very easy to demonstrate on camera. People want to know how much ice to use. And I will say that doing a stovetop distillation like this, the ice melts very, very quickly. So you are going to find yourself inundated with a puddle of water in your lid quite often. And you might have to refresh your ice as you go through, but you want to be very careful not to dump any of the ice water into your hydrosol when you remove your lid. So we're going to start off with a big heaping pile. You don't want so much ice in there that when it melts, the puddle gets bigger than the lid and starts dumping out all over the place. I've done that many times. All right, this cute little scoop's not actually working, so I'm just going to use my hands. That's a little bit better. This is really good chunky ice. So hopefully it won't melt as quick. Okay, getting there, getting there. Feels pretty good. Look at this like ice castle I'm building here on top of this lid. That's probably going to end up being way more fluid than the lid can handle, but we'll just see what happens. Right now, I have the stove turned on high, so it's all the way on high. Temperature in distillation is such a sensitive thing. And it depends on so many different factors where you're going to put the temperature. Most often, I think people feel like they need to use higher temperatures because it makes everything happen much more quickly. And we don't want to spend all day distilling on our kitchen stove. That being said, one of the things that I talk about often when I'm teaching distilling is that we are asking the aromatics of the plant to come out of the plant material. In many ways, for me, the aromatics are like the soul of the plant. And if we are really cranking that heat up, it's like, give me your soul. And it can destroy the aromatic compounds. It's a much more aggressive process. It's not as gentle and not as beckoning. And we want to use the heat to beckon, not to cook. So for right now, for the sake of this demonstration, I have this turned on high just because we want to get the process going. But I would always say, start as gentle as you possibly can and keep that temperature as low as you can while still achieving sort of a simmering, if you will. We don't want the water boiling. We want it simmering. We want it steaming up and steaming through that plant material. So just be gentle with it, be sensitive to it. And then also, you can't walk away from this. Once you start this process, you can't walk away. Don't expect it to be fast. And also schedule the time in so that you can be present for it. And use the lower heat. You will definitely enjoy the lower heat. This is the most exciting part. Waiting. It's like watching paint dry, but you're actually watching the water boil, which we all know takes a very long time when you watch it. Something's happening. I love the sounds of distillation. You know, there's always, in this situation, it's really hard to sort of see what's going on with your hydrosol. It's very different when I go to show you the actual copper alembic process and just give you an example of what that might look like. You can really see the hydrosol coming out of the unit. And that is nice to see because you can interact with it. You can test its pH. You can smell it. You can sometimes even taste it to see how it's doing. And in this situation, we're in a closed environment, which you don't have much of a visual for. So, but don't be afraid. Don't be afraid to play with things. All right, I can hear it. There it is. There it is. There it is. There it is. All right, so that was the big rush of the boil. And I've just turned it down just a little bit because We want to go ahead and make sure that we don't want to cook the plant material, right? I said we just wanted to gently warm it up, encourage it, beckon those aromatics out. Okay, so one of the telltale signs that you can have, other than listening and actually being able to see the steam rising, one of the telltale signs you can have with the glass lid is you can start to see the condensation being created on that lid as a result of the steam hitting that cold lid with the ice in it. And so as that condensation starts to build, you know that your hydrosol is going to start flowing. And then it's time to wait. Oh, patiently. So I wanted an opportunity to show you what a copper alembic still looks like and how it functions, because it can teach us a lot about the physics of distillation, even just looking at this unit and putting it together and explaining all of that. But not everyone is going to have access to a still like this, which is really great. This is why you can use your stove and still make hydrosols. But I thought I'd take you through these pieces and parts. I know a lot of you are probably interested in having your own still someday. So here's a little crash course. Our first main unit is our pot. And this one you can see it's got some dents in it. Totally fine, totally safe. Copper is a very soft metal, especially when it's hot. So if you ever do get your hands on a copper still, you want to be very careful not to punch at it or accidentally drop it or knock it into things, because it will dent. But you want to be careful because you can also rip the copper. And of course, if you put a hole in your pot, you can no longer use it. So with that, if you dent it, leave it be is generally what I say when it comes to the pot itself. So this is where we're going to put our water. There's two different ways of distilling using a copper alembic still. One way is referred to as a proper steam distillation, and the other is a hydro distillation. Hydro distillations are when the plant material and the water are in the pot together. So what we're doing on the stove over here is technically a hydro distillation. So there are certain plants that do better in the pot, like evergreens and, believe it or not, even rose petals. As you journey in your distillation adventures, you will learn that there are certain plants that do better in the pot itself. Doing a steam distillation, however, requires that we use the column, which is this piece here. And you can see that the column has all these cool holes in the bottom. And this is where you would pack in your plant material. So for example, if I was doing something very fleshy like peppermint, I would want to use the column, because if I put the peppermint in the hot water, it's going to smell like steamed cooked peppermint instead of letting the steam pass through the plant material in the column. So I would be packing the peppermint in here pretty strongly. You want to pack it in as much as you can and be using the column like this. So I'm going to show you how this all goes together. So let's just say we're going to do a steam distillation. We've got our water in the pot. I don't ever fill it up past the handles. You probably don't need to with this. This is a 10 liter, by the way, this size. And we're going to go ahead and pop this together. We've got a pin. This is the pin. And the pin for the pin. Don't want to lose that. All right, so this is a rotating column. And that means that, you're supposed to be able to stop your distillation, open this up, clean it out, put more plant material in, fire back up and keep going. I never really find that to be the case when I'm distilling. But nonetheless, we have our water in our pots. We've got our peppermint, let's say, here fresh in the column. And then we're going to move over to this piece, which is the swan neck. And it's the swan neck for a reason. As you can see, it has that sort of vibe to it. And I'm going to go ahead and say that this one has a little temperature gauge on it. A lot of people find this very helpful when they're distilling. I personally don't. It tends to be much more important if you're doing spirits or alcoholic distillation. So for steam distillation, it doesn't necessarily matter as much for me, knowing what the temperature of the inside of the still is. I'm going to be paying attention to other features of the distillation that are going to let me know whether it's too hot or not hot enough. But some people ask. Okay, so I'm going to have to move this around this way. So this swan neck's really amazing, this feature here. And this design in particular is really amazing because the physics is so cool how this all works. If you're using your column, you're also going to have an extension like this, And so this just gets screwed on like so. This is going to go into your condenser unit. Put this down for a second, and I want to show you something. This is an important feature I want to show you. So this is your condenser. So similar to what we have going on with the ice in the lid of the pot, we can circulate really cold water using a pump around this coil inside. And when the steam comes up, it gets condensed into a smaller and smaller space. It then will come and hit the condenser. And the condenser will be cold because we're circulating ice water around that condenser. And then your hydrosol comes out here. I will mention that when you look at the coil, this is a closed unit. So the hydrosol is going to be flowing down this and coming out this, but it does not come in contact with the ice water at all. That's what these things are for. So physics of this I think it just makes for a good visual. First of all, copper is just awesome. It's a cool metal. And putting it together, you can see. And then I would have something like this coming in the top and the bottom of the condenser to be pumping that cold ice water through. But it's great. So the physics of this, again, I'll just repeat it. There are two things that turn a gas back into a liquid. One is pressure, and the second is temperature. So as the water is simmering and boiling, it's going to pass up through the condenser. It's going to capture all of those essential oils and all of that hydrosol and all of those beautiful aromatics. It's going to get shoved into this, what I call it the lid. It's the lid, or I call it the Taj sometimes because it's got that cool shape. So as you can see, it's all of a sudden, it's an expansive space, and then it shoves it into a really tight space. So our pressure is now building, right? And as the pressure continues to build, as this gets smaller and smaller and smaller and smaller and smaller, it finally gets shoved down into this area, and then boom, it hits that coil that's circulating ice water around it, and we have our liquid coming back. And that's your hydrosol and your essential oil that will be coming out of that end there. So very good to see this, I think. And these stills are awesome. They're super fun. Something like this size as a 10 liter is actually, you can do this on your kitchen stove as well. It's not too big. This size is a really fun one. You can also get a 5 liter, which is a bit smaller. And that way you can experiment a little bit more. It's a little bit cheaper, and you can scale up from there. So really cool to see that. And with that, we're going to check on how our hydrosol is doing in the pot. All right, so we've let everything cool down, and we've got some hydrosol here. I could have probably let this go a little bit longer, but for the sake of our demonstration today, we went ahead and stopped. So we've got our bowl of hydrosol here. Really interesting to have a look at the plant material when you're done distilling to see and to also smell how much is left in the plant. And in this case, we probably could have gone a little bit longer. There's still quite a lot of aromatics coming out of this pot. But here we are with our bowl. We've also got our storage container and a funnel to help us get our hydrosol into our storage container. One of the things I'll mention again is that this is a living medicine. And we're in a kitchen setting where we're not necessarily going to have the sterilization or sanitation that we need to keep a really shelf-stable water-based preparation around for too long. The worst thing that can happen with a hydrosol is that it can basically go off. And this is usually a bacterial bloom. And you'll see a bacterial bloom if you're using a very clear glass storage container. So it's ideal to not only make sure your storage container is very, very clean, but to have it stored in glass that you can see through. Because you're often going to see a bacterial bloom before you smell it. And I tend to say that they look like ghosties or wispies inside of the jar. And if you tend to see those in your hydrosols, you know that they've gone off and that you probably shouldn't use them anymore. So we have our hydrosol here, and this was super fun. It's a really interesting combo. I will say I've never done lavender and rose and an evergreen together before. So this was totally new for me. Really love it. And there is a little bit of essential oil, very small amount on the top floating around. And you can see that because it will rise to the surface and it will create a bit like a tappeta pattern on top of the water. You might see like little goblets of essential oil kind of floating around the top. So everything's nice and clean. And we're going to go ahead and just dump this in, easy peasy, like so. Wow. That smells amazing. And so we've got a little bit of hydrosol here. I'm going to go ahead and make sure that lid is put on. Before I do, I just want to go like this though. I want to. Whoa. Whoa, that's actually really good. I'm impressed. I've impressed myself. Great. So this is our hydrosol here. You'll see that it's a little bit, I don't know if you can see this or not, but it's a little bit opalescent. And that's a really wonderful thing about hydrosols is that sometimes, even when you're doing them on the stove, you might notice that they have this sort of opalescence to them. They're a little bit, it's see-through, it's water, it's still translucent, but there's a hue in there. And sometimes even when you're distilling, you might discover that it's very milky when it comes out, or it looks a little bit more opaque and very opalescent. And that's totally fine. Usually that clears out pretty quickly. But what we don't want is we don't want it to go from opalescent to clear back to opalescent, because that means that you've got a bacterial bloom in there. But it's just a nice sort of moonlight kind of hue to it. So that's super, super lovely. And then what I would do as far as storage is concerned, some people, you want to put a label on this for sure. You want to remember what you've done because you will forget. And you also want to put, get the date that you've done it so you know how old it is. I think if you're going to do a stovetop distillation, you probably want to use that hydrosol within a couple of weeks, ideally, maybe a month. But if you want to store it for longer periods of time, I think in this case, the best idea is putting it in the refrigerator and keeping it there. So one of the things that hydrosols don't like is they don't like to go from room temperature to refrigerator to room temperature to refrigerator, back and forth and back and forth. If you're going to store in the refrigerator, keep it in the refrigerator. If you're going to store on the counter, keep it on the counter. But flipping it back and forth, sometimes that can encourage that bacterial blooming to happen. And then, we can just use something really wonderful like this, one of these cute little spray bottles, to put our hydrosol in, carry around in our bag, and spritzify when we need a little emotional support. It smells really amazing. I did not fail. Oh my goodness. Oh my goodness. Ooh, she's nice and full. Oh my God, it's so exciting. It's like my favorite thing in the world. My favorite thing in the world. I mean, how lucky are we to be surrounded by plants that have such good smells everywhere? It just feels like such a gift. Give it a bit of a shake. Wow. It doesn't even smell like it was cooked or boiled to death. Well, and that, my friends, wow, that's amazing. Well, that just brings me so much joy. That, my friends, is Stovetop Distillation. Have fun. Don't be afraid to experiment. And don't forget to take notes, because if something like this works really, really well, you're going to want to do it again. I promise.